This is Better Know District. Today I'm here with Senator Sonya Halpern.
Hello.
Thank you so much for being with me today.
I'm so glad to be here.
So you
Cannot
represent...
wait to tell you all about Senate District 39.
Yes, you represent Georgia's 39th district,
Yes.
which stretches from South Fulton County all the way to the Buckhead area. Tell me about the Fighting 39th. What do you think makes your district unique?
I love the 39th district. And as you said, I definitely cut through neighborhoods in College Park, City of South Fulton, East Point, Union City, and then many of the neighborhoods in the heart of Atlanta. One of the things that makes this district so unique is that it is one of the most socioeconomically diverse districts in the state and in the country.
And geographically diverse.
And it's 22 miles
right.
north to south, kind of looks like a snake with its mouth open if you were to look at it on a map.
Mm-hmm. And your district, I know, has a lot of culture. There's a lot of institutions in the district that represent parts of Atlanta culture, like Woodruff Arts Center, I know, I can think of one. So I wanted to ask about a legislation that you've sponsored designed to support Georgia's culture industry, and that is SB 182. Tell me about that bill, what it does for Georgia's music industry, and what inspired you to sponsor it.
So SB 182 would create a Georgia statewide music office. Think of this as a centralized hub for all things music in the state of Georgia. We have an incredible long history and heritage of music throughout our state, not just in Atlanta, and across every kind of musical genre. So when you think about, for example, our film office, which has done an incredible job under the Department of Economic Development in really boosting and bolstering the film industry in the state, a music office would do the same thing. It would really promote Georgia as a hub for music, and it would let the world know that we're open for business in the music space. So whether that is instrument producers and makers, whether that is tour origination, whether that is artists who are looking to record in studios, whether that is concert venues, right? We have every single thing already. It is a $5 billion industry already. And so that centralized hub with that really intentional focus on promoting us is really what the aim is here. And we would be joining many other states in having an office that focuses on music. Texas is the gold standard. They have been with a music office for 30 years.
Wow.
North Carolina has one. Tennessee has one. And I would argue that we have as much of a music powerhouse
if
in
not
our
more.
state, absolutely,
Right.
and assets in our state as those other states. My interest, though, I'll just share it for music. I have a very deep passion for the arts. Long before I ever ran for the Senate, I was involved in a number of different cultural institutions, including chairing the board and running the National Black Arts Festival, which is now 35 plus years old. And I also chaired one of the national boards at the Kennedy Center in DC. And so the arts, I just think, is an area of focus, and it is economic development. A lot of people don't think about it that way, but it's workforce development and economic development in addition to all the things that we know that culture does in terms of connecting communities.
And staying in that topic of kind of the creative economy, I want to ask about the Senate Study Committee on Tourism that I know you chaired. What was your biggest takeaway from that committee? I know y'all got to tour across Georgia, which I'm sure was super interesting and insightful, but what was your biggest takeaway from that?
So I did not chair that committee, but I was a member of it. And the whole purpose of the committee was, how do we make Georgia the #1 state in the nation for tourism? I will say that tourism, and a lot of people don't know this, is our #2 industry right now, behind ag. And so when you think about the hospitality industry, because it's everywhere, it's easy to forget all the things that encompass it. But we really set out to figure out, how do we really boost Georgia? Where does Georgia fit in terms of the full ecosystem of states really focusing on tourism and attracting people to their state? And we learned that, that we've got a lot of work to do. And so I was really excited to be on that committee. You know, my family, we're in the hospitality industry. We are restaurant owners. And so whether we're talking about restaurants, whether we're talking about hotels, whether we're talking about event venues, whether we're talking about sports, I mean, that whole entire ecosystem is what makes up tourism. And the more people that we bring to the state, the more people get to enjoy everything that we have in this state. So one other little fact, aside from the fact that it's our number 2 industry, that I learned that I love to share is that there is more kind of ecological diversity from the south of Georgia to the Georgia mountains than there is from the Georgia mountains all the way up to Canada.
Wow. That
that
is
great?
a fun fact, yeah. And another thing I was thinking about is that a lot of residents may not, understand what it's like to have the tourist industry because they're not, experiencing it frequently. But I did want to ask, representing a district that has such a rich minority presence, you've sponsored what's been called Georgia's Civil Rights Act. What about that legislation do you think is so critical in this moment in history?
This bill which I introduced last year, would be a comprehensive civil rights law that would be on the books in Georgia. You may not realize it, but Georgia is one of very few states that do not have already a comprehensive civil rights law on the books. It is becoming more and more important because when, for example, we passed things like RFRA, which was the Religious Freedom Act last year, many of the other states that have passed that actually already have, this baseline of what is allowed and what is not allowed, what is considered discrimination, what is considered an overreach, and what is not. And without that extra protection here at this state level, it leaves up to interpretation what's allowable and what's not. We know that we are a very diverse state. That diversity is absolutely our strength, and it's the strength of my district in particular, too. And so we just want to make sure that no matter your religion, no matter your race, no matter your gender, no matter your sexual orientation, that you can't get discriminated against, whether we're talking about housing or education or even just going to a retail shop. So it is really important. I think also right now in this particular moment in time when we're talking so much about constitutional rights and in the infringement on civil rights, that it becomes even that much more important to say unequivocally that Georgia has its baseline. We have set it into law. We have codified how we all understand that every single Georgian should be treated.
And another topic about consumer rights as opposed to civil rights, you've sponsored legislation that relates to hotel booking procedures, which may seem like something people shouldn't, prioritize, but walk me through what that legislation means to you and why you think it's so important.
So you will be surprised. Actually, you won't be surprised. There are scammers out there everywhere, but there are fraudulent websites that actually are kind of these third parties where their interface, like if you were to look at the website itself, it looks like you are on a real hotel website. So now you are on this website, you are excited about that weekend you're going to have away, you book your hotel room, you pay for the hotel room, and then when you show up at the hotel, they have no record of your reservation because you actually did not book on their site. So this bill really is meant to kind of protect consumers from that and make it a lot more visible to anybody as they're booking that this is an unaffiliated vendor, unaffiliated organization to the hotel, and make that clear. And it can't be like hidden in the small terms and conditions nobody reads. It really has to be visible so that you'll know, and it'll at least make you think for a second, okay, is this legitimate or not? Now, this doesn't affect at all, the third-party outfits out there like the Expedia.coms and the Airbnbs, like all of that stuff is legitimate.
Right.
So it doesn't affect that at all. It really is trying to target and protect consumers against those folks who are really just trying to take their money and run.
And I know that consumer protection has been on the minds of many the past year. It's been a very important issue. Another issue I think a lot of people have been talking about is healthcare, which I know has been a real roadblock at the Georgia Capitol in achieving meaningful legislation. What do you think should be the priority for the Georgia General Assembly to, kind of make sure that all Georgians are receiving effective care without breaking their bank?
Yeah, there's a number of different things happening all at once as it relates to healthcare. We've talked for a long time here in the General Assembly about access, and access can mean like, how far do I have to travel to find a doctor, right? And we know that we've got counties that don't have a single OBGYN, that do not have a single primary care physician, right? So there's that kind of access. And then there's the access that really is a financial hurdle, right? I don't have the money to be able to go to the doctor, or my insurance premiums are so high that it prohibits me from going, and I end up using the emergency room as my primary care doctor when I need to, at which point my symptoms are much worse than if I'd been able to get preventative care service all along. So we understand the issue, and I should say, at the same time, we've got hospitals, right, that are on the brink of closure because of the mix of patients in terms of insured and uninsured. That is, by the way, a problem, not just in our rural areas, and we talk about it a lot in rural, but we had a hospital right here in Atlanta, just outside of my district, close in the last 2 years because the hospital, left. And left a huge hole also here. So it can happen anywhere. I think that we've talked for a long time about Medicaid expansion, and Medicaid expansion is one piece to the puzzle for sure. But I also think that given right now that the Affordable Care Act's extended premium tax credits have expired, and at the federal level, Congress has not acted to reinstate those. And we see Georgians, hundreds of thousands of Georgians, health insurance premiums rise, and they are making the very difficult decision of, should I pay for my health insurance, or should I, pay my rent, or should I eat, or should I, not have my prescriptions. So I think that there's work that the state can do around the premium tax credits. I think that there's a lot of work that the state can do, as a matter of fact, around reinsurance. But there's a piece of legislation that I'm a sponsor of that would let the state step in and help to subsidize a bit the extended premium tax credits that have expired at the federal level. And there's all kinds of things that we could be doing. I wish that we would focus on healthcare, because at the end of the day, if you don't have your health, it's hard to have anything else.
And in terms of kind of getting people across the aisle to sign on to those bills, do you think some of those bills that kind of start to just chip away at the problem have seen more interest, or has there been kind of no interest at all?
No, there's been some interest. I had a bill that I introduced last year. Actually, another piece of the Affordable Care Act was around preventive care services, which for the last dozen years have been free. So there's a whole long list of services, and it's really like annual screenings, things like mammograms and colonoscopies, or vision for children, or falls for the elderly, where you can actually go to the doctor and you will not have to pay you won't have to pay anything. It's a zero cost. And that is being challenged in the Supreme Court, at the level of the Supreme Court. So I had a piece of legislation I introduced, which was a bipartisan piece of legislation that would have ensured that here in Georgia, insurers know that regardless of what happens at the Supreme Court, that they cannot now charge consumers, Georgians, for those same services that we've gotten so accustomed to not having to pay for. And it was bipartisan. It was signed on. It just didn't move. So it didn't get across the finish line. It didn't even get a hearing. So it's not that we don't have, in a bipartisan fashion, the understanding that healthcare is an issue. I think we have not come to agreement on how to solve that issue.
Or putting it as a priority, right?
No.
Yes.
And it's even in this most recent budget that we are just starting to work through the process. Health is not as high of a priority in terms of additional dollars that it needs to be.
I want to ask, you are also serving on the Education and Youth Committee, and you represent Booker T. Washington High School, which is obviously the first public high school for Black students in Georgia. How does legacy of that school kind of inform the way that you look at education policy today?
And Booker T. Washington just celebrated last year, I think it was just last year, its 100th anniversary. So it is a very old high school. I think that Booker T is a perfect example, and we could probably name so many others around the entire state, of schools that have children with a lot of promise and possibility, but that also are in neighborhoods where they, are not coming out of the best socioeconomic background. So this is very much a zip code issue. And honestly, in Georgia, if you were to overlay kind of the poorest performing schools in the state and look at the socioeconomics of the area that they're in and lay them on top of each other as if it were two maps. It's almost a perfect match. And so I think Booker T. Washington is just a proxy for the fact that we absolutely need to understand that there are children who, through no fault of their own, need additional help. We've talked a lot about an opportunity weight funding formula that needs to be added to our quality basic education funding formula to make up that difference. They're just going to need more support, and so, you know, slowly but surely, we're trying to chip away at that as well.
And I know, in addition to that level of education, you've supported from in the chamber and out of the chamber HBCUs across Georgia. So I wanted to ask about, you know, that process. What do you see as the biggest challenge to HBCUs in Georgia, and how do you think the Georgia General Assembly can support them?
So HBCUs in Georgia, and I'll tell you, we have 10. So 7 are private, and we have 3 public that are part of the university system of Georgia. So all of them, though, have capacity building needs. They have resource needs, facility needs, aging facilities. All of them need to build up more institutional resilience, every single one of them. And I know this to be true because way back in 2022, I actually chaired a study committee on excellence, innovation, and technology at Georgia's HBCUs. And we went to the different schools and heard from university leaders. We heard from community stakeholders as well, including like regional economic development and chambers. So we know how important they are to the state and the asset that they are in every community that they serve, but they do need more resources. So 2 things that I've done to try to support them includes, 1, launching an HBCU caucus in the Senate. We are modeling this off of the congressional HBCU caucus, which is bipartisan and bicameral, to give us a chance to really dig more deeply into issues and figure out in a bipartisan way how to help solve those gaps. And HBCUs have always been historically bipartisan. And then there was a piece of legislation that came out of that work as well, which will create HBCU innovation and economic prosperity planning districts. So how do we center these community assets, right? That we know have a major economic impact on the state. I think it's $1.2 billion economic impact in our state. And how do we center them in the conversations around economic development? And how do we make sure that where the community's needs and their needs match, that we find the money to, you know, to draw down, whether that's from the federal government, corporate foundation, philanthropy, to really meet those needs. And it could look like as varied as things like housing, which everybody needs more housing. It could be small business incubators. It could be digital infrastructure or even sidewalks. But that bill passed in the Senate and then stalled in the House, but never you fear. My work on HBCUs continues, and I actually partnered with the HBCU Brilliance Initiative and just announced the first cohort, which is 11 different schools that are going to be receiving grants and technical assistance.
Amazing. Also
through the support of the Kresge Foundation.
Well, fingers crossed that legislation gets to the House someday.
Someday. It will.
And I'm pretty confident that you know your district, but as always, we got to do trivia time. So I will name a landmark that is in or out of your district, and you will guess if it's in or out.
Yes.
All right, you ready?
I'm ready.
All right, first landmark is Lindbergh City Center.
Lindbergh City Center is in, and as a matter of fact, it is the headquarters of MARTA.
Yes, and next one is the AUC.
AUC is not. So for all of the work that I've done on HBCUs, the reality is the Atlanta University Center is like 2 blocks outside of my district.
At this point, I would argue they should just change the lines maybe.
I agree.
Some redistricting.
Maybe next time.
Maybe next time. Next landmark is the Atlanta History Center.
No. Now, funny enough, now I've been in my seat for I'm in my 6th session, so this is my 6th year. When I first ran in 2020, the Atlanta History Center was in my district, but I have had 2 different redistricting in that time, and
Wow.
it is no longer in my district. Close, but not any longer.
Right. Next landmark is Colony Square.
Colony Square is.
That's right. All right, next one is the Carter Presidential Library.
Carter Presidential Library is not my district.
Unfortunately, love that place,
It is
but
wonderful.
that is correct. It is not. Next one, Georgia Tech.
Georgia Tech is, and I'm really excited. That is the big university that is in my district.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Last one is the Delta Flight Museum.
No. I go south, but I do not include the airport
Right.
or the museum. I do, however, have one of the airport CIDs, but not the flight museum.
And I know that the district kind of comes down and curls, but
It
it does
does.
not reach the airport.
It does not.
Well, I think we can confidently say that you, Senator Halpern, know your district. Thank you so much for joining me today. I
Thank
think we've
you.
learned a lot, and we've learned that you know your district. Thank you.
Thank you.
See you next time.